So Baruch Hashem, I'm back from Chutz La'aretz. So while I was in Chutz La'aretz, I gave many shiurim. I was a bigger Batzis Torah, but it's always a pleasure to come back home, back to Eretz HaKodesh, back to my family, and back to my Talmidim, and back to my blessed routine of our Batzis Torah. This week is Parshas Kiseitze. And one of the important mitzvahs in Parshas Kiseitze is Kisivne Bayis Chodosh V'osiso Maakah Legegecho V'lo Sosim Domem Beveisecho Ki Yipol Hanoifel Mimenu. The last year I said before I left to Europe was about Menias HaSakona. And I always speak about this sugya before Bein Hazmanim. And I always cry and plead and beg and talk and shout, look after your children. Because every Bein Hazmanim we know tragedy. And to my dismay, it happened again and again. Infants drowned in home pools in Shiurim in the north. Boys drowned in lakes. Tragedy that b'derech hateva we could prevent if people really would be careful of nishmarta moile nafshosechem. But today we focus on Maakah. Is the other side of the same coin. Mitzvah saseva, mitzvah loitase, v'osisa Maakah legegecho. Does this mitzvah refer exclusively to a roof and building a gate on the roof and Maakah? The Rambam seems to offer a broader interpretation. Hasoras hasakone v'hamechsholos. Sefer HaMitzvahs mitzvah kuf pei daled. And I'm reading the mitzvah together with you. Shetzivonu lo hosir hamechsholos v'sakonos makol moishvasenu. Lo hosir hamechsholos v'sakonos makol moishvasenu. However, the Rambam continues, V'zeh, shenivna koisel sovev agag v'sovev aborish v'shichen v'adoimelem, kedei shelo yipal ha'mistaken mehem o behem. V'chein kol ha'makoyim ha'misakonim v'ra'uyim, kulam yibanu al seido, sheyoser ha'ra'ua v'asakona, v'hu amoroi, v'osiso Maakah legagecho. Does the Rambam mean the broader aspect of asoras, hasakonas v'amachsholos? If in your backyard you have a tree, an old tree, and it might fall, cutting off that tree, is that the mitzvah say of osiso Maakah legagecho? How far do we go in the interpretation of osiso Maakah legagecho? So there are two extensions. One is quoted in the Rambam, and the source is the Safri. Osiso Maakah legagecho. Boiros, shichen, umaoros. In your backyard, you have a well, or just a pit, a big gaping hole, or a cave. The Sefri says that is also part of the mitzvah. In a way, it is similar to a roof. What's the difference between a roof, or a pit, or a well that a child or a person could fall into? But would that include you can't have poisonous snakes in your background, in your backyard? So removing those snakes, either putting them in a cage or destroying them, would that be the mitzvah of Maakah? We're not dealing with falling. We're not dealing with falling from up to down, gravitation, or a sulam re'ua, or any other sakona. So on one hand, the Rambam says, Laheser hamachsholos v'asakonos. The Rambam says the same, and I think it's even more explicit in Perek Yud Aleph, Hilchos Tzech v'Shmiras HaNefesh in Halacha Daled. And let's have a look what the Rambam says there, because I have a disagreement with the Minchas Chinuch in the interpretation of the Rambam. Perek Yud Aleph Hilchos Tzech, and Hilchos Tzech is actually Tzech v'Shmiras HaNefesh. Echad Agag הלוך ד' ויכול כל דבר שיש בסכונה וראוי שיכשל באדם וימות, כגון שהייתה לו באר או בור בחצרו, בין שיש בו מים בין שאין בו מים, חייב לעשות לו חוליה גבוה 10 טפוחים. And then the Rambam goes on, וכן כל מכשול שיש בו סכונס נפושס מצווה עשה להסירו ולשעמם ממנו ולעזור בדבר יופי יופי. כל מכשול שיש בעשוס נפושס. Obviously it's the same as Sefer HaMitzvahs, but I think here it's even more clear. וכן כל מכשול שיש בעשוס נפושס צריך להסירו ולשור ממנו ולעזור בדבר יופי. שנאמר, השום הלכו שמור נפשך. He quotes another mitzvah to say, not only Maakah, v'sisa Maakah legecho yishom alacho. That's the suga we spoke about a month ago. V'im loy heise v'nich ha'mechsholes ha'mavin adei sakona, bitul mitzvah say v'avar b'lo yisosim domim. What does the Rambam mean, bitul mitzvah say? Is that the mitzvah say of v'sisa Maakah legecho? Or rather the mitzvah say of yishom alacho u'shmor nafshecho ma'oid? Minchas Chinuch Tov Kuf Mem Vav understands that Rambam means Yishom Alacho. Because Hasoras HaMechsholos is not the mitzvah of Asiyas and Maakah, it's the mitzvah of Yishom Alacho. Maakah is a gag, the sakona of falling over the side of the roof. According to Minchas Chinuch, Boides, Shichen, V'Ma'oris, a well, a pit, yes, but not other sakonas of Mechsholim. That is Yishom Alacho. My understanding would be no. This is Hilchas Maakah. Hilchos Maakah. The only reason that Rambam brings Yishom Alacho is Lishamer Yafa Yafa. So a month ago in the previous Shiur, I made a comment. Sakir Chamira Sakanta mi Yisura. It's Yerushalmi in Tumas and a Gemor in Bavli and Chulin Daftes. And I explained, it's not only a Sforah. The only mitzvah in which the Torah emphasizes ma'oid twice. V'nishmartem ma'oid le'nafshu seichem. Yishom alachu v'shmor nafshechu ma'oid. So the reason that Rambam brings Yishom alachu is just to emphasize le'izor yafa yafa. But when the Rambam writes in the end of Halacha Daled, Im loy heiser asakonis v'machshoylem bitul mitzvah say, he means the same as in Sof Halacha Gimel. Im lo oso Maakah beroish agag bitul mitzvah say va'avara lo ta'ase. Contrary to the understanding of the Minchas Chinuch. I think that's Pashtus Kavonas Rambam, but it's also the Bir Agra. There is one siman in Shulchan Aruch which we do not find in the Tur. I mentioned this a few times in the past. One siman, and it's the very last siman in Shulchan Aruch. Choshe Mishpat is the last of the Abot Turim. So Choshe Mishpat in the Tur, the last siman is Tov Chavav. Shulchan Aruch Tov Chav Zayin. Tov Chavav is about the mitzvah l'hatzilat hanefesh. Sanhedrin Ayin Gimel. Menayin l'roich haveret tovei benor elistem bo'om olav shemitzu l'atziloi. Lo yisosam dum bevesechom. And then the Shulchan Aruch adds on Tov Chav Zayin, Siyas Maakah. What we learn in the Rambam is two seifim in Shulchan Aruch, Tov Chav Zayin, Vav, and Ches. Si Vav deals with direct Maakah barosh agag. Im lo yosa Maakah, bitel mitzvah say v'avar belo ta'ase. Siv Ches, v'chein kol ha'mechsholos sheyesh b'hem sakona. Mitzvah lasirom, v'lezo yofi yofi, shenemar yishom alacho. V'im lo yeiser ha'sakonis v'hamechsholos. Bitul mitzvah say v'over aloi ta'ase. In the Gaon we count letters, not only words. And this line, Im loy heiser asakonis v'amachshoylem bitul mitzvah say, the Gaon writes two words, Kanal b'sivav. It's clear. Kanal b'sivav. Sivav, Shulchan Aruch says, Im loy oso Maakah berosh gagoy over bitul mitzvah say. Which one? V'sisa Maakah legegecho. That is Siv Ches as well. Lo kedivra Minchas Chinuch. So I think the Rambam's approach really is to interpret V'sisa Maakah legegecho b'oifen rochav b'yoisa, with a great extension. Hasoras kol hasakonas. And why is that not included in Yishom alacho v'shmor nafshecho ma'od? There's a fundamental difference. All the other sugyas are to avoid sakona, b'shev al taisa, stay away. You're not allowed to drink mayim megulim. Maybe a snake poured some venom into the water. You're not allowed to drink from the rivers or the ponds by night because you might swallow a leech or a parasite. You can't go under a wall that isn't standing straight. It might fall on your head. It's all sheval taisa. Steer clear from sakana. In Maakah we learn you need to be preemptive. You need to be active. You need to initiate. You need to build a Maakah. That is the fundamental difference. So the Rambam writes, Hasoras hamichsholim v'hasakonos. That is what Sisa Maakah lekecho. But every michshol and every sakona. That is the way the Gaon understood the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. But there are Rishonim that clearly had different feeling. Smak explains the Essa and the Lotasa are not just two sides of the same coin. Sometimes the Essa is without the Lav and sometimes the Lav is without the Asay. So the Smak actually follows the Toises in Kedushin Lamedalad when Tois explains. The Mishnah says, Kol mitzvah say she'enas man grom enoshim chayavois. And one of the examples is Mak, and Toises asks, Mak is a Lav, so Noshim are chayav anyway. Toises says, sometimes there's Asay without a Lav. If you built a Maakah and it fell down, you're not over on the Lav. When you move into a house that doesn't have a Maakah, but if it had a Maakah, it fell down, you're only mechuyev in the Asay. The Smak adds on. Sometimes we have a Lav, we don't have the Asay. Sulam ra'ua b'toich beisoy. If you have a ladder and it's not strong enough, and a person would climb that ladder and he might fall to his death, that is the Lav le'sosem de beiso. But it's not the mitzvah saseh of Sisa Maakah legechom. So it's clear in the Sma. Hasoras hasakona is removing danger. It's not the mitzvah saseh. It is only the Lav. Maakah is only a Maakah. Yes, a pit or a well in your yard is similar to a Maakah, but not other sakonas that are not the same as a Maakah in any way. And this brings us to a fundamental question. The Sifri says, it's not on your roof. Boiris, Shichen, Ma'oris, Be'er, Besoda. So we extend and broaden the essence of the mitzvah of Sisa Maakah legechom. But on the other hand, there are sugyas in Shas, and all these sugyas according to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. Maakah is only by a bias. But the Knesset, but the Medrashos have no mitzvah of Maakah. Beis HaWoitzev and Beis HaTeven have no mitzvah of Maakah. And that's in Chulun Kuf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Bava Kama Daf Nun Aleph. Bias Shem Bo Asorat Vochim. It's not defined as a bias. There is no mitzvah of Maakah. Even though the Gag is wide a tefach. So from the roof there is a Asorat Vochim, which is Yesh Bo Kidei LaHomes. But because in the room there is no Asorat Vochim, it's not defined as a bias, there is no mitzvah of Maakah. Source number 3, Sikad of Gimel Amud Aleph. Bias Shem Bo Dalad Al Dalad. Not Ra'ui Ledira, there is no mitzvah of Maakah. Why would it be different than any other sakona? Chazon Ish has a very fundamental approach about Maakah. And it explains many dilemmas. Chazon Ish writes, the mitzvah of Maakah is not the same as Hishom Alacho V'Shmoy Nafshecho Moed. Because usually if a person is on a roof, he takes care. He takes care. He could avoid sakana. You don't come close to the edge of the roof. You don't come close to the brink. In a way, it's similar to Bava Metzia Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Posting in this week's Parsha, Ki Savoy Bekeram Reacho V'Ochalto Kenafshecho Dovesho Odo Moise Nafshe Olav. And this is the source of Achilas Poyalim. And the Gemara says, people climb trees, they go on scaffolds, they go out to the sea to catch fish. But it is not a prohibition. So the Chazon Ish explains, well, it's a dangerous undertaking, but you could be careful and you could avoid danger. It's within your power. So why is there a chiyuv of a siyas Maakah? I just want to stress a point which the Chazon Ish doesn't really stress enough. All the other sources of Manias HaSakona, I explained before, there's a difference between Kunvasei and Sheval Taisa. There's another difference. All the other sources are Sakona that I expose myself to a Sakona, and it's not within my power to prevent that Sakona. I go under a wall which might fall. If it falls, I'm doomed, and I cannot prevent the wall from falling. I'm drinking Mayim Agulim. If there's venom in the water, I'll die. There's nothing I can do about it. But you go up on the roof, like climbing a tree, or getting up on a scaffold. I mean, b'derech hateva, you could be careful, and you are careful. However, so why is there a mitzvah v'siyas Maakah? Because sooner or later, somebody's going to fall and somebody is going to die. And that is why the Torah says, no. Yes, you're a responsible man. You're going to take care. But you are going to go up on the roof, and others will, and children will, and the elderly will, and sooner or later somebody's going to die. And that is why there's a that would explain. Yes, it's in your yard. It's in your home. So sooner or later somebody's going to fall in there. However, but the Knesset says about the Midrashos, people shouldn't be there. Probably they won't be there, and therefore there is no chiyuv of Maakah. That is the fundamental approach of the Chazon Ish. But the Chazon Ish goes to a greater extent. And this brings us to the Smag, Sefer Mitzvahs Godel and Mitzvahs Asay Ayin Tes. We learned before the Rambam, source in Sifri, not only Maakah legagecha, Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores as well, a well in your yard as well. But the Smag says Gimel Tvochim. But the Shia Maakah is Asara Tvochim. Chazon Ish Lishitos, and he says, Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores, according to the Smag, there is no mitzvah saseh of a siso Maakah legagecha. Only a lav, loisosim domim beveischo. And regarding the lav, Gimel Tvochim would be enough. So according to the Chazon Ish, the approach of the Smag is Vosiso Maakah legagecho is exclusively a gag, a rooftop. Even Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores, it's not a gag. Sholosh machlokes v'davar. Shittas Asmag, according to the Chazon Ish, gag is gag and nothing more. Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores is the lav of Leisosam Domem Veisecho, not the mitzvah say of Asisa Maakah legagecho. To the other extreme is the Rambam, and the understanding of the Gaon in the Rambam. Every michshol and every sekona, if you remove your makayim the mitzvah, if you did not remove it, you're over not only the lav, but the mitzvah seva sisa Maakah legagecho. The smak is in the middle. Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores, yes. Sulam ra'ua, no. In my opinion, I think the Sifri clearly says V'osiso Maakah legagecho includes Boiras Shichen v'Ma'ores. Mitzvah saseh as well, not only a lav. So why Gimel Tvochim? I think the Shiur of Asara Tvochim b'Maakah is not a locha l'Moshe Messinai. Mechitza Asara Tvochim is a locha l'Moshe Messinai l'gabe Mechitza Shabbos. Doifen Sukkah locha l'Moshe Messinai. These are Shiurim. By Maakah, it's a umdena of Chachamim. Chachamim will convey the Shiur Asara Tvochim. It's not a locha l'Moshe Messinai. And Maakah is not a Doifen Sukkah. It's not Mechitza Shabbos. Because even according to the Chazon Ish, we will need an explanation. Okay, it's not the mitzvah seva sisa Maakah legagecho, but there still is a lav loisosam domem beveischo. So we must assume Gimel Tvochim would be enough to prevent Yipol HaNoifel. So why by a Maakah begag do we need a Asara Tvochim? We need some logical explanation. So we must say there is a difference. A roof is far more dangerous, usually higher. A roof could be 5 meters, 10 meters. Usually a well or a pit in your background is not that deep. So it's a lesser sakana. It's an av gimel tvochem heker. So why do we need to say there's only a lav and not a asay, even if there is a asay? Nimsa adova lachachamim. Sora tvochem is not lochel misham sina. It's not exeis akosav. And therefore, chachamim murkavei kol davar lefi inyonoi. The greatest sakana is a rooftop. There we need a sora tvochem. In your yard, boides shichen v'ma'ores be'er, gimel tvochem would be sufficient. There's enough kamina, whether it's only a lav or also a mitzvah gabi brocha, because we don't say a brocha on lavin. So when you build a Maakah, the Rambam clearly says you need to make a brocha. How about boides shichen v'ma'ores? Masarav min hogei agro, siv kof. Yes, you need to make a brocha even by the Maakah boides shichen v'ma'ores. Chayodam, tezvav, chav daled. See if Chav Dalet says no. Chayodam is a predecessor. He says like the Chazanish, boides shichen v'ma'ores says only a lav, not a say, and therefore you don't see a brocha. But I say it is a mitzvah say, like I explained. But the entire concept of brocha is questionable. Rambam clearly says, Perek Yud Aleph, that you say a brocha on a siyas amak. Perek Yud Aleph halacha Aleph. But it's not in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch added an entire siman on the mitzvah of Maakah. Tov Chav Zayin Choshev Mishpat, the last siman, speaks nothing about a brocha. Neither does the Ramo. Neither does the Beis Yosef. Rabbi Kiva Ege quotes the Rambam that you need to say a brocha. Sefer HaRokech Shin Samach Vov clearly says you do not say a brocha. Why not? Two explanations. The Rambam Perek Yud Aleph Halacha Aleph in Hilchos Brochos says we don't say a brocha only a mitzvahs sheben odom lamokim, not a mitzvah sheben odom lachaveiroi. The Kesef Mishnah explains the Rambam, and this is a chiddush that is shared by some other gedolim, similar to the Rashba, not exactly. Tshuvas Rashba Chelek Aleph Siman Yud Ches. The explanation is Asher Kedushonu b'mitzvoisav. Those mitzvahs that are obviously Kedushas Yisrael and a Chelek of Avodas Hashem. Mitzvahs sheben odom l'chaveiroi are different. Tshuvas Ben Yomen Zev Siman Samach Zayin goes a bit further, and he says you only say brachas on mitzvahs that non-Jews aren't mekayim, mitzvahs that are essentially avodas ukeil, not mitzvahs sichliyos. So I don't think it would be right to define asiyas hamak as a mitzvah sheben odom l'chaveiroi. Ben odom l'chaveiroi is the interaction between people. Tzedakah, gemeres chasodim, bikar cholim, achnas esorchim, kibud avayim. But Maakah is close to Ben Odom L'Chaveiroi. It is logical. It's just to prevent sakana. And in that type of mitzvah, there is no bracha. And maybe that would explain the Shulchan Aruch's Hashmota. There's another question. If we do make a bracha, when? Tshuvas Chasam Sofer Chaim Nun Beis say Maakah Shachroim, when you finish the Maakah. Because as long as you didn't finish the entire Maakah, you did nothing. There still is sakana. But on the other hand, kol mitzvos mavorach aleim oivel asiyosan. Oivel asiyosan means this day chemed has a kuntras on asiyas hamakah. Asifas dinam in asiyas hamakah and brochas. Sdei chemed quotes several achronim when you start oivel asiyosan. But usually from starting to build a makkah till you're going to finish, there's going to be a lot of hefsek. Depends how big your roof is. Sometimes you're going to go to sleep, you're going to eat it, you won't finish it the same day. Regardless of the fact that today it's very uncommon that Jews build the Makkahs. Probably you're going to have Palestinians or others building the Makkah. So how will you say a brocha? Halacha l'maisa I paskin, you don't say a brocha on asiyas hamakah. Sofek brochas lahokal. If a guy builds it, you can't say a brocha. Ein halacha kedivrei hamachne Ephraim, that a person can say a brocha when a non-Jew does a mitzvah for him. It's also the opinion of the Pri Chodesh Simakuf Chof Lagabe Tfilas Kelim. But it's a gewaldige chiddush. Even if you build a Maakah yourself, when? The beginning, end. Sefer HaKech says there is no bracha. Shechnuch doesn't bring a bracha, neither does the Rabbah. So halacha l'maisa, my psak is, you do not need to say a bracha on asiyas Maakah. So today we discussed one of the very important mitzvahs. Yoisem masha omarti lefnechem kosuv kan. And I think Minchas Osha Pashas Kisei, the new edition that we expect to be out in a short while, there's a big arichas on asiyas Maakah, hafoich bo v'hafoich bo dekule bo. So this week we read Pashas Kisei. And I always say, whatever we learn on Elul, we need to learn in the spirit of Elul, in the feelings of Elul. So it's not only in Sifra Musa v'Chasidus, in Zohar and the Midrash Chazal, this posuk is also interpreted regarding Melchemes HaYetzar. And many times I quote the Chovis Alvavis. An officer, Sarat Sava, a military commander, came home from the battlefield victorious. And thousands of people came out to greet him, to cheer him on. Douglas MacArthur in New York after the Second World War. And a chassid approached that general and he said, you think you're coming back from a great battle, you're coming back from a Malchama Katana. The big battle is still before you, and that is Melchemes HaYetzar. Why is that the greatest battle? By the nature of warfare, as we learn from history. Some wars are short and some are very long. Hundreds of years ago, Europe knew the 30-year war, which was actually a religious war between Catholics and Protestants and, fueled by religious animosity. The Vietnam War took, I think, almost 20 years. In Afghanistan, Baruch Hashem and Etz HaKodesh, we knew a miraculous war, the 6-day war. But at the end of a war, by the very nature of warfare, it is obvious who is victorious and who was vanquished, who is the winner and who is the loser. By Melchemes HaYetzar, you never know who's the winner and who's the loser. Al tamen biyatzmach ad yoy moischa. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Shimish Bekohuni Gedoyle was a Kohen Gadol 80 years. Vele besaf naset tzedoiki. Ad zebula batraita. To the last breath of your life, the Yetzer Hara will always fight you. You think he's on the ropes, and suddenly, with new vigor, a new strength, a new power, he's up again. And you could never be confident to the last moment of your life. This is the greatest battle and the toughest battle. So according to the Zohar and Midrash Chazal, Kisei Tzala Malchama refers to this war, to this battle. Unesone Hashem Elokecho biyodecho. You just need to wage war. Kedushin Lamed Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Yitzay Shalodam es Gaber Ola B'kol Yoyim Lahamisoy Ve'ila Morei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ozro Lo Yochaloi. Without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, we could never win this war. The Yetzer Hara is too powerful, and he is within us. He's part of us. He's in our hearts. He's in our every fiber of our being. It is only Siyata Dishmaya. But you just need to fight. And you'll have Siyata Dishmaya. Abole Taher Mesai in Loi. And that is what the Pasuk promises. Ki seitze lemalchom alavecho. Be confident. Unusone Hashem Elokecho biyodecho. But you need to fight. So many times I said in Brochas Daf Hey Omud Aleph, La'olam yarges odam yetzer hatoiv al yetzer hara. And Chazal interpret the pasuk Rigzu v'yal tachto imbro belvavchem al mishkavchem v'doim Yisraelum nitzchem utav lo nitzchem yasek b'toira. If you won the war, okay. If not, Kriya Shema lo nitzchem yask al yom misa. And Chazal don't say lo nitzchem. What now? Nothing now. If you learn Torah, you say Kriya Shema, you remember death, then you're guaranteed you're gonna you're going to beat the Yetzer. Manoima manedaber. We learn Torah a lot. First say, the second say, the third say, the Beinas Dorim. Hundreds of thousands of people today, yeshiva bochum, koil guys, and sometimes we hear terrible stories of great Talmidei Chachamim that did awful things. So Torah not only proves itself as the efficient tool connected the Yetzer Hara. How about Kriya Shema? We go above and beyond the call of duty. Meikar Adin, we need Kriya Shema Shel Shachris, V'Shel Arvis, B'Shach B'Chov Kamecho. We recite Kriya Shema 4 times a day. First time before Psukkah de Zimra. 4th time, last time, Krishma Shalamito. It is more than we are required, Meikar Adin. And we still have a Yetzer Hara. How about Yaskalayim and Misa? Well, if you live in Yerushalayim, somebody else takes care of that. Every 15 minutes there's a loudspeaker roaming the roads in Yerushalayim, notifying us. Another Lavaya and another one and another one. So, yes, if you're in Yerushalayim, you have Yaskalayim and Misa. And I know some grave diggers, Chevra Kedisha people. Some are great, some are tzaddikim, some aren't. So Yaskalayim and Misa obviously doesn't always work. How could it be? Torah, Kriya Shema, Yom Misa, and it doesn't work? The answer is a very simple one. Everybody remembers, Nitzchoy Mutav, Loi Nitzchoy, Yasik B'Torah, Kriya Shema. People don't realize the opening statement of Reish Lakish. La'olam yargez odam yetzer hatoiv al yetzer hara. Rashi says, Yase imo melechama. You need to fight. Kriya Shema, Torah, Yom Misa are weaponry. Those are the tools of war. Those are the artillery, the infantry, the tanks, the missiles, the planes, the bombers, the fighters, the interceptors. But no army ever won a war without fighting. And some great empires and armies lost wars because they didn't have the spirit to fight. And they didn't want to fight. Not because they lacked the power. Not because they lacked the tools. They lacked the spirit. They lacked the will to fight. La'olam yargez odam yetzer hatoiv al yetzer hara. The problem is we don't identify the enemy. He is so smart and clever and witty, he pretends to be a friend. You can't win a war without fighting. So most of us have a peace agreement with the Yetzer Hara. We made peace with the best of friends. If you don't identify the enemy, you can't fight him. And if you can't fight him, you can't win him. So how do you expect to win this war if you're not fighting? If you think he's a friend. He's a bitter foe. He's not a friend. He pretends to be a friend. And if you will fight the Yetzer, Torah, Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim, Yom HaMisa, guarantee victory. So the pasuk says, Ki seitze lemelchama alevecha. Identify your enemy and fight him. And if you do, yes, Kadosh Baruch Hu will help. Unasonei Hashem Elokecha biyodecha. V'yim lo achshov eimosai. Now is the time. Now is the time to wage battle. Now is the time to fight. Fight your Yetzer Hara. Try to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do tshuva. Be more serious and devoted and dedicated to your Torah life. Unasonei Hashem Elokecha biyodecha. We should all have a ksiv v'chasim tov, a good gebenched yom. It should be a shnas go una v'yeshua. B'mehera v'yomeinu. Amen.